Welcome to our next session by Michael Plöd, Riding the Elevator, DDD in the Penthouse. Please welcome the speaker.
Hello. All right, it's good to be back here at this year's KanDDDinsky without COVID. I was the only COVID case in last year's KanDDDinsky. Sorry for that. This talk is about basically about connecting a few dots between basically two books. I'll talk about them later on, and so maybe some of you may ask, hey, what about the penthouse? What's that? That's where your leadership resides. Yeah, and as architects, we sometimes have the task to talk to leadership persons, or even as facilitators, as lead developers, and so on, here and there. We often have the task to talk about leadership, to talk with leadership about certain topics. And I would say a live coding session may not always be a suitable approach to those folks. So today I'll give you a few hints how you can leverage ideas from domain-driven design when you communicate with your IT leadership or your CEO, your CTO, or maybe even your CFO in an organization. I'm Michael Plöd. I work as a fellow, which is a consultant, so to say, at a company called InnoQ. I'm heavily invested in the DDD stuff, team topology stuff, and I would say in the last couple of years I've always been talking a lot to managers, leadership people, and so on, and I want to share some of my experiences with you in that talk. So one of the books that I want to talk about is that book from Gregor Hohpe. Who knows that book? Yeah? I like that book quite a lot, and I appreciate Gregor as well quite a bit as an expert in his area. And Gregor approved that talk. Yeah, so I hit Gregor up and said, hey, Gregor, is it okay if I'm doing a talk about your elevator kind of thing? He was like, yeah, go ahead, do that. And this is a book that I recommend very, very often. And one of the major quotes from that book about work as an architect, for instance, is, so this book has a very strong software architecture topic, but I think it can be seen in a way broader scape, this general idea. Yeah. He says that we want to align organization and technology. We want to reduce friction and chart transformation journeys. In addition to working with UML and architecture styles, such architects ride the architect elevator from the penthouse, where the business strategy is set, to the engine room, where the enabling technologies are implemented. They shun popular buzzwords in favor for a clear strategy defined by conscious decision making. I like that idea, that perspective of an architect job quite a bit, yeah, because it includes a lot of communication tasks, yeah, a lot of bringing people on board things, a lot about building bridges, yeah, this idea. And let's take a look, yeah, the penthouse, yeah. What are the typical topics that leadership persons, yeah, in our area of activity are talking about? It's about stuff like make or buy decisions. How can I make my organization more agile? Yeah? How do I structure my teams? How can we transform our existing legacy software, for instance, to the cloud, to something else, to modernize it? Yeah? How can we become a product-driven and not a project-driven organization? Digitalization is a very popular topic. I'm pretty sure that quite a few of you folks work in organizations where this term digitalization is tossed around quite exponentially. Yeah? How can we make a differentiation in a digital market? Yeah? How can we, this autonomous teams thing is also a very popular topic in that area. Yeah? So you may ask yourself, well, I'm at a DDD conference. What about that stuff? Let's take a look at domain-driven design. Yeah? What are typical things that domain-driven design is talking about? It's, of course, about domain modeling, about identifying boundaries for bounded contexts or subdomains maybe. Yeah? Creating a shared understanding between domain experts and developers. There's this categorization idea for subdomains like core, supporting generic, context mapping, iterative design works. So how could they complement each other? Where can we draw parallels between these two ideas, between these two books? Yeah? I think in the quote that I've initially shown from Gregor, yeah, there are quite a few things where we can already sketch a few bullets, yeah, and connect them together, yeah, those dots, yeah, about aligning organization and technology. Yeah, I think DDD is a lot about aligning stuff. Yeah. Business strategy, yeah, think about core domains and the differentiating part in core domains. Yeah. How do we implement stuff? Yeah, I always say, in the end, yeah, domain-driven design is about delivering software. It's about writing code that is highly expressive. Yeah, it's about bringing a domain model to life, and life is very often code. Yeah, and also about making decisions. Now, for the remainder of this talk, I will give you a few quotes that you may hear from the penthouse. Yeah. Sometimes they may create a bit of a laughter here and there. Yeah, you know those quotes and the PowerPoints and stuff like that we usually sometimes get from the penthouse. And then I will pitch in with, hey, where is stuff in the DDD space plus some surrounding ideas that we can address with that. So when you hear stuff like that, that you can pull out, yeah, from your existing knowledge about domain-driven design and say, hey, listen, there's something that we've got. Yeah, we may have you covered in one or two places here. Maybe let's elaborate on that. And let me give you, before I start with that, a motivation for that. Yeah, I think for doing good iterative domain modeling, yeah, for doing a lot of the domain-driven design work, we need a suitable environment in order to do that, so that we can work in iterations, that we can toss away false assumptions and admit that openly, yeah, that we have a blame-free environment, yeah, that we can apply continuous learning into our day-to-day practice. And I think the penthouse has a very big deal of leverage on that. So by bringing the penthouse on board, yeah, I think we can make our own domain modeling, yeah, whatever work that we do, better. Yeah, and I think we can convince people in a better fashion. So let's start with the first quote. We start an agile transformation. Yay. How can we do modeling, design, and requirements engineering in this scenario? Yeah, so I think everyone has heard this thing in their organization, transformation here, agile there, and so on. So what does that actually mean? Yeah, I mean, of course, the cheap exit to that is, oh, the development teams are now doing Scrum. Congrats. Yeah, nice first step, but that doesn't make you agile in any way. Yeah, in a very limited area. Now, what I'm going to do in that talk, when I talk about DDD stuff, I'm heavily referencing stuff from that GitHub organization there. I'm pretty sure some folks at this conference have already mentioned this thing. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff by quite a few folks who are speaking and who are present at this conference that's being published under Creative Commons license. And I will use the DDD starter modeling process in order to showcase you in which area, yeah, we could address these things. So one of the key messages that I would send is take a look at the iterations there, at those arrows. Yeah? By nature, DDD is iterative. Yeah? And it's based on continuous improvement and learning. So when we say agile transformation, it also means iterative modeling, agile modeling, so to say. Yeah? Finding out what works, yeah? Learning in production, refining the model, maybe kill one or two darlings along the way, yeah, by tossing away certain boundary options, by comparing options that we have. Yeah? And a very interesting thing when I always hear on a management level this agile world being tossed around. What I often pull out is the Agile Manifesto. Yeah? Let's grab the Agile Manifesto. Yeah, there are those 4 key principles, and then there are 12 more detailed principles in the Agile Manifesto. Let's compare them to DDD. Yeah, and I think what we can see, yeah, I'm not going to read over the whole thing right now, yeah, but just let the one thing sink in. Business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. Does that sound a bell? That's the core idea of domain-driven design there. Yeah. Also, yeah, this changing requirements thing, yeah, and continuous learning, yeah, which is an essential part for continuous delivery of software, is addressed more or less directly from DDD. Yeah? And also, the first one here, the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. Well, I would say that's a pretty core DDD idea. Yeah? Let's have business people and developers talk together. Yeah? So what you can do, yeah, when someone pitches around this Agile thing and thinks in terms of huge processes like Scrum, Spotify model, or SAFe, and all that crap, yeah, let's start with the basics and compare things. Yeah? So a key message can be, hey, we have an answer, and basically DDD thrives in an Agile environment. And I would say DDD fall is a really bad idea. Yeah? Domain-driven design in a waterfall. That's like taking a look at a fancy car, and when you try to push the pedal, you realize, oh, there's a lawnmower motor in there. It drives, but it's no fun. Yeah? So I would say there's quite a few things covered there. Also, the thing, we're business-driven. Everyone knows this. We're a business-driven company. Okay, so there's one thing in this align phase, and I would say that's not directly DDD stuff, but there are a few cool ideas surrounding the DDD stuff. So a question that I very often as a consultant ask to people in leadership positions in the penthouse is, do your architects understand the business model of the application that they are responsible for? So what I very often do as a consultant is that I ask people, hey, you're in a software architecture role. How's your application earning money? Or what's the business model? What's the key differentiator? What's the value proposition of the business model of your application? And the answer that I get very often is, Michael, that's a really good question. Silence. Another part is, let's say the architects are able to answer that question. Cool, really good stuff. But do we have a shared understanding about the business model among different stakeholders? Is there an aligned understanding? How can you do really good modeling work if you have a disalignment on the understanding of the business model? I think that's a pretty tough task. Yeah? Now, a thing that can help you along that way is the idea of a business model canvas. I won't go into a lot of detail here. We could talk an hour about that, and I think Shofi Harendi has done quite a few workshops about business model canvas at KanDDDinsky in the past. Yeah? But what I sometimes do is that I give this canvas to various groups of stakeholders. Let's say I give that to some domain experts, I give it to some software engineers, to testers, to project management, to the upper leadership people, and say to them, hey, please fill that out for your group alone. And then we compare the perspectives together. Interesting stuff coming out. Yeah? Very often, yeah, I see a 50% alignment on that. I think that's not enough. I think it's really time well spent to get together and get an understanding. How do we want to differentiate on the market? Who are the customer segments? How do we want to earn money? Where do we spend money, yeah, on things in order to move forward before we make any modeling decisions? Because I think, on a modeling perspective, I think certain subdomain or bounded context options, they work for a value proposition, and others work against a value proposition. Yeah? I think there's something in there as well. Yeah? So let me ask you a question. Who works in an organization where this term digitalization is tossed around very frequently? Yeah. So, next question, what is digitalization? What does it mean? What do you think? Anyone? Paper to apps. Okay, from analog to digital. Yeah. On a more general note, yeah, and that's something that I very often use in the communication with those stakeholders in the penthouse. I come up with two purposes for digitalization. One is you try to improve an existing business model with technology. So the business model basically stays the same, but you try to improve some things. What you mentioned with the paper to digital, that's very often in this area. So you try to reduce the error count. You try to become faster, let's say in approving a mortgage loan. Yeah? You try to improve the user experience through a fancy UI. You try to drive down costs. So the nature of the business model stays the same. But we use certain technology to improve things. That's what a lot of companies are doing these days. Yeah? The second one is, in my eyes, I call it the Holy Grail. Yeah? You try to create a whole new business model, which is enabled by technology. Yeah? So I think that's something we're going to see, or we already start seeing, in the AI, machine learning, large language model space, and so on, that this is an enabler for completely new business models. Yeah? Think about the whole generative AI stuff, for instance. Now, a very interesting thing, and what I've learned, is that quite a few folks on a leadership level agree with me. Yeah, that's pretty decent. That's pretty spot on. Now, one thing that I then point out from a DDD perspective is, hey, did you realize that business and tech appear together in both purposes? Yeah, so there needs to be a collaboration. Yeah, those people need to work together, because otherwise you have we have an app now, digitalization, which is crap. Yeah, which doesn't make a lot of sense. This is cheap digitalization in my eyes. Yeah, so one thing that we could then say is, oh yeah, Michael, yeah, you're right. Let's introduce DevOps. Okay. So, what we have are those stakeholders. We have developers and architects. And we have ops folks. And what we want to have there is, or let's say, let's not reduce that to roles, let's see that on a skill set level. Yeah, we have some operating skills in an organization, we have some development, architecture skills in an organization, and those skills should collaborate together with DevOps. And that's something that I'm always a little bit sad about. Yeah? So sometimes I do DDD talks at DevOps conferences, and when I walk over those conferences, I see a lot of stuff like Nginx, Rancher, Kubernetes, and cloud, and whatever. I see a lot of tech ops stuff. I see way less cultural stuff, and for me, DevOps is a culture. Yeah? About collaboration. And a really good idea about that. Yeah? But I think one of the slogans from the DevOps community is this, you build it, you run it stuff. But I think when you do that without a shared understanding what you built, you may do quite a lot of DevOps, but the impact will be not so cool. Now, what I always point out, for instance, in my domain-driven design trainings, that there are many shared ideas between the ideas behind domain-driven design and DevOps. Yeah? In one of the trainings, a participant raised her hand and said, hey, Michael, you're talking about the DevOps culture. I was like, wait for it. I've got a slide for that. The cultural idea is really similar. There are a lot of parallel ideas, yeah, and attitudes. We want to have a collaboration, yeah, in the DDD space with these things. And when we combine these things, yeah, I think we can move towards a you design it, you build it, you run it. Isn't that, yeah, the idea of so-called cross-functional teams? Yeah? A cross-functional teams design stuff, they build stuff, and then they run it in production. Yeah? And I think this is something that very often happens also in the perspective of the penthouse. They say, oh, agile cross-functional teams reads perfectly on a slide deck. Yeah? Looks great. But what does that actually mean? Let's break it down. Yeah? In the end, I think the folks from Amplitude have a really decent infographic on that I very often use in this communication task. Yeah? So they have this journey to product teams infographic. Really good stuff. I like that a lot, so big props to them. Yeah, and they have a bunch of stages. Yeah, I usually don't work with those stages very often in this communication task, but I work with the idea. So basically those gray things are, this is a team. Yeah, that's being done in a team. And then the gray arrow is an external handover. So one team does something and they hand it over to another team. That takes time. Yeah. Yeah, the thought folks, I think it was James Lewis from ThoughtWorks, did some research and said, hey, in the moment where a piece of work leaves the boundary of a team, it takes more time. And then we have stuff that happens in a team. That's in these yellow bars. And the pink arrows are a handover inside of a team. So we have two skill sets, and between those two skill sets in a team, there's an implicit boundary, so to say, and they hand that over. And then we have stuff that's happening inside an iteration, where we really have a cross-functional collaboration. So when I show that, I would say this collaboration here between design, build, and test, for instance, this is where a lot of the domain-driven design heavy lifting takes place. This is where a lot of the DDD stuff is happening. For instance, I recently had a customer where they said, oh, cross-functional agile teams, blah, 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 blah. But inside the team, there was a handover. There were business folks on the team, and they were building and drawing UML diagrams, and they handed them to the developers. Hey, implement that diagram in Java code. We're an agile cross-functional team. No. You have no collaboration here. There's a handover happening. And very often, working with this raises eyebrows. What I very often see, oh, is that the consequence? Yes, it is. So let's do some expectation management here and make sure that we have a shared understanding what decisions we need to make, where things are happening within the boundary of a team and not. And also, a very interesting part is when we want to move responsibilities to the left, over there towards opportunity selection, requirements planning, design, and so on, is that this requires that the developers and the architects need to have a solid business understanding. How could they otherwise select opportunities? I mean, they could, but I think that's going to be a little bit harsh in the outcome then. And I think a very big helper for that is this discovery phase here. How we can do that. Or as Alberto said, what goes to production? It's not the domain expert's knowledge. It's the assumptions of the developers that go into production. And we could, I mean, that reads nicely, but what could possibly go wrong on that way? I have an example for you. Let's take a look at that hotel room. I guess quite a few folks here are going to stay at a hotel. And reflect about your hotel room. How would people usually name these things in a hotel room? Like window, trolley, TV, desk, chair, painting. Yes, of course, Michael. No surprise here. But what do I sometimes see in code reviews or architecture reviews? I see package names, class names like Transparency Factory, Decorator Impel, Entertainment Provider Singleton, Work Enablement Device, how about the rollable stuff container, or the good old REST provider, which has a really good clash with the integration stack then. Awesome. Good stuff. I think that's something, you're laughing now and may think that, hey, Michael, you're too nasty now. That's too crazy. I have an example for you. I was shopping for a pair of jeans 5 years ago at a retail fashion store for pretty, well, Not the cheapest fashion store, not super luxury stuff with 800 euro jeans, yeah, something in the price range of 150 euros per jeans. And you can see my legs are not too long. Usually I go for a leg size of 30. So I asked someone, hey, do you have that pair of jeans? I like that quite a bit. Maybe in a different retail store in my size. And the person who was selling the jeans said to me, do you have 5 more minutes time? Because then I can tell our apprentice how that works. I was like, yeah, okay, cool. It's a Saturday afternoon. I'm not in a rush. Let's do that. And they started talking. So you need to go to this tab T_FIL_. And I was like, what are they doing there? So I looked over the counter a bit to the UI. I saw a 3270 terminal. Yeah, so the old folks here may remember that. That's a mainframe UI on a host system, COBOL stuff. Fancy UIs, not. So I had the assumption. They're talking about the table names of the DB2 database on the host there. And they were. I know someone working there. So I was able to validate my assumption. Unfortunately, I was wrong. I was right. Yeah, I wish I would have been wrong. So regarding that, yeah, this collaboration is super important. Yeah, and we need to do stuff. And it's also something where we can say, hey, team brainstorming is a really good source for feature ideas, for products. Yeah, and what should be your proposition to the penthouse? Hey, do collaborative modeling stuff. We have something in our big toolbox that addresses these things, that addresses these gaps. Yeah, there's the event storming stuff, domain storytelling stuff, event modeling from Adam, and so on. User story mapping from the Agile product development world really works well. And now a quick hint. Very often, especially in larger organizations, you will see business teams who are doing design thinking stuff. Yeah, this is something that's quite popular among quite a few business organizations, especially in larger orgs. Yeah, and this is something where you can jump ship. Yeah, this is something where you can say, hey, we also have stuff that works really nicely in that process. Get us on board. Yeah, let's work together. Yeah, this is not something that you should do only on the business side. Yeah. I have, at some customers, proposed event storming workshops in design thinking projects, approaches, and so on. And the design thinking facilitators were open for that. They said, hey, that sounds like a feasible idea. Let's do that. Yeah? And then you have a foot in your game. Yeah? You bring the foot in, because very often engineers and architects complain, oh, we are always so late in the process. True, you are. That's a problem, and I think everyone in this room will agree with me on that. Yeah, but so this may be an opportunity for you to come up with a good proposal, with a good argumentation, to bring your foot early into that game. Let's do another quote from the penthouse. We want to become a tech-enabled product organization. Sounds good, doesn't it? What does that mean? Yeah. So, first, I think we see a shift in strategy very often. Yeah. So, IT and technology has often been treated as a commodity in many organizations, as a cost center. Yeah, the strategic approach was economies of scale. Yeah, IT should be as cheap as possible in many organizations. Yeah, we want to have economies of scale. So reusability. Build one thing once and run it everywhere. We know the game. Yeah. Now, with this kind of strategy shift, we also see different economies at play. Very often, it's economies of speed. Yeah, so that means we want to become faster in our delivery. Yeah, we want to speed things up. We want to apply continuous learning and so on. Yeah, we want to get away from feature factories. Yeah, and in that play, yeah, we often see strong insourcing approaches from the management. Nick Tune had a really nice visualization for that, which I want to quote heavily on the next slide deck. So props to Nick for that. He called it innovation cycles. Yeah, we have teams that take a look at the market, what's going to happen there. The market always expects a better user experience. Yeah? Think about electric vehicles, all the smartphone stuff, all the e-commerce stuff, and so on. Yeah, there always will be players on the market that change expectations from customers on our products. And I think a lot of that is also enabled by software and software architecture, which is then being built by the teams. There's a guy in the Agile community called Gregor Hohpe. That had a very good quote. But before I go into that, I want to say one more thing. And that's something that I very often say in modernization, especially when we're doing DDD stuff in legacy modernization environments. Please go ahead and now build a foundation that can be a decent ground for continuous improvement. Very often I see very big change projects, budgeted at two-figure millions of euros, on software that had a very, very low maintenance budget throughout the years. Oh, we had 2 folks who were able to maintain that for the last 10 years. That was so cheap. And now you're doing Spring Boot and Angular and it gets more expensive. No, that is not the case here. And this change project is so expensive. Yeah, it's because you didn't do your homework in the last 10 or 15 years due to the minimum maintenance that you had. Those are basically costs that have piled up so that we need to go for a big bang change. And I'm very honest, I hate big bang changes in such scenarios. I try to avoid them wherever I can. But a good step is that we create a foundation here that can accommodate continuous improvement, small changes, low risk, smaller budgets, smaller insecurities in an organization. And Alan had a really good quote on that. He said that the key to an incremental architecture is to build on a framework that can accommodate change. That framework is the domain. By modeling the domain, you can more easily handle changes to the domain. Because no one on the business side is going to wake up at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. in the morning and saying, today I'm going to torture a few poor developer souls with some crazy requirements. That's not going to happen, never. No. Well, they will raise requirements based on their perspective, and we need to align those perspectives together. So on the bigger picture, the quote of Alan can be visualized like that. That we want to have a software architecture that should be a model of the business domain. Who has read that book Accelerate or know about that one? Yeah, quite a few folks. Good read still. And they did research. What makes up a good and powerful IT delivery organization? And what are patterns of organizations on a cultural, architectural, management style, whatever level, that when you do apply those patterns, you have a pretty good chance to become a high-performing delivery organization. And one of the findings that they had, that a loosely coupled software architecture and a matching organizational structure is probably a good idea in order to scale up the delivery. So when we apply this learning from that book to this picture, we get something like that. That we want to have teams that are aligned to the architecture. I would say that's something that is really suitable for communication with leadership folks. I think that works very often pretty well. And I would say that this part is the essence of strategic DDD. Strategic DDD addresses exactly this stuff. And also, when you hear this tech-enabled product org thing, let's quote Narem Katakam on what product thinking is. It's the journey from the problem space of the users to the solution space of the business. We want to reduce the gap. we have the terms problem space and solution space in DDD as well. Yeah? Problem space is where domains and subdomains are. Solution space is where our bounded contexts are. Yeah? Or as Matthias and Rebecca wrote in their amazing blog post, which I like quite a bit, and I highly recommend you to check out this blog post, splitting a domain across multiple bounded contexts. Domain live in the problem space. They are how an organization perceives its areas of activity and expertise. Now, what are our domains? Yeah? Can we discover some things? Is there something in there where we can shape the problem space with? Yes, there is, with all the collaborative modeling stuff that we have. There are a bunch of interesting heuristics for domain storytelling, for event storming, yeah? And if we do these things early on in these collaborative stages, yeah, in an iterative fashion, we have a really neat bridge to into these things. Yeah? And we can build up on that, in my eyes. Yeah? Because very often, yeah, we also hear stuff like, let's go on software as a service in the cloud as our new IT strategy. We heard cloud in the Gartner reports and some stuff, and that sounds like a good idea. And very often there are good ideas in there. Absolutely. But please, with a strategic approach to these things. Yeah? And also for that stuff, in combination, yeah, with this problem space, product-enabled organizational things, we can pitch a DDD idea here, which is in the strategize part. Strategic DDD knows 3 categories for subdomains. Core subdomains, yeah, which are super important, where we want to have a differentiation that we want to keep up at least mid-term, preferably long-term. Yeah? Differentiation, yeah, also is very relevant to the business model on your value proposition. You need to understand the business model in order to make a good decision over there. Whereas generic, for instance, yeah, we have no desire to differentiate at all. I always joke in my DDD training courses when I do them on site that I hope that they didn't hire me as a trainer because we have the most sophisticated way of doing travel expenses. Yeah, that would little be a shame to me. Yeah. Well, that's something that we have to do. It's a necessary evil. Or is there anyone who loves their travel expenses? No one, I guess. Yeah, and then there's also the supporting subdomains, yeah, that are a little bit in the middle between the two. Now, there's also a heuristic called the core domain charts, yeah, that Nick Thune also brought up. And what I very often do in workshops when I run these classifications with people, I say, hey, how do you want to differentiate on things? Let's pull in the business model canvas. Yeah? Let's talk to business people. Let's take a look at the IT strategy, at the strategy of the company in terms of the differentiation. And then we map the complexity. And after that, yeah, we say, okay, according to the heuristic, that should roughly be core. That should be supporting. That should be generic. Never ask people what should be core, supporting, and generic, because then you are always discussing against core. Yeah? Everything should be core. Oh, everything is important. No, it's not. Yeah? And from there on, yeah, you can, yeah, also a good quote that I once heard when I was at a bank, when I was working at a bank. I heard the quote, hey, we're a bank, not a software shop. Well, I think they regretted that strategy from 20 years ago. But how can we use that for those quotes for some questions to the penthouse? What I very often ask leadership persons in this area, okay, when we have done that, how are your teams staffed? Where do you have internal developers? Where do you have external developers? Yeah? Very often in many organizations, I see quite a few internal folks working here. And up there we have some fancy consulting software delivery company that does all the interesting stuff. It should be exactly the other way around. Yeah? Or where do you want to invest in self-written software? where do you want to buy stuff off the shelf? Yeah? So I would say up there, yeah, I don't want to work with custom off-the-shelf software because custom off-the-shelf speaks against differentiation. If you can buy it, everyone else can do it like that. Yeah? You want to build your own software with your own teams. You want to own this thing. You want to drive this. This is where you want to spend your IT budget. Yeah? Where you want to do the IT budgeting. Yeah? This is where a big chunk of your IT budget and also your business budget should go into. Whereas over there, I just go for software as a service or some standard software. Let's take SAP as an example. Yeah? Over here, I would do things the way that SAP solves them. Minimum customization, maybe for integration stuff. Yeah, but I would just go the standard SAP thing, even if the SAP consultants tell you otherwise, because customization pays well. Yeah? Up there, maybe we would do some customization on SAP. Yeah? But dear management team, please have the discipline to keep that up. That goes hand in hand with discipline. And that saves you money that you can spend over there. Yeah? So you see, I'm using strategic DDD stuff for discussions like that. And very often, yeah, I see that those discussions are quite fruitful. Yeah? So the next thing, agile cross-functional teams, autonomous, fast delivery, the whole thing. Yeah? Well, there's an idea for that, yeah, with the bounded context. And again, there is quite a good quote in this blog post by Matthias and Rebecca, yeah, that we want to manage the understandability of a system with that. Yeah? And we want to have a good alignment between problem and solution space here. And a thing that helps you with that is, for instance, the bounded context design canvas. But I don't want to go into too much detail on that. I want to use that to jump towards organizational stuff. Yeah? There is a great book on the market for 3 years now, or even 4 years, Team Topologies. Yeah? Quick hint to the German folks here, if you haven't read that, end of November, a German translation of Team Topologies will be released through O'Reilly, and I was the translator. So if you prefer German books, maybe you want to wait till end of November. And what those folks, Matthew and Manuel, said that the bounded context is a really good fracture plane for a team. Yeah? Because we also take a look into the cognitive load. Yeah? We want to manage the understandability of a system with that. Yeah? If a team is able to learn and master domain complexity, if they conduct experiments, if they can deliver high-value software. Yeah? And if we want to have very happy teams in our core domains, yeah, maybe the literature of Daniel H. Pink can come into play nicely there. Yeah? A happy team has autonomy, they master their domain, and they have a clearly defined purpose. And I think, and this is, for instance, literature that your HR managers very often have read, yeah, in my experience. Yeah? So you can say, hey, if this is something you want to achieve, we have something here. Yeah? And we can even move that further away with ideas from Team Topologies, or maybe even unfixed from Jürgen Appelo, yeah, which is a nice fit in there as well. And I think this is also something, yeah, where in classic strategic DDD, we have the context maps, yeah, which can visualize various aspects of team relationships as well, of organizational aspects, and of team communication and communication needs for teams as well. I have worked with various leadership persons with context mapping, yeah, and showed them, hey, this is what you assume that your governance in your organization is, but that's what it actually is. And this is where the bottlenecks are. This is where politics are being played. Yeah? Maybe we want to address these things. Yeah? So you can use context mapping on a very, very low level, engineering level, but you can also use it on a very, very high strategic level with the terminology. Yeah? Especially where do we have customer-supplier relationships? Yeah? Where do we have a mess of a system, a big ball of mud? Yeah, where do we have clear APIs with open host services and so on? Yeah, so this can be very, very helpful in these discussions. Yeah. So I would say, yeah, maybe what I wanted to show you in this talk is how you can use ideas from domain-driven design to address typical management topics that the management has. Yeah, because we want to convince people. We don't want to manipulate people. Yeah? And sometimes, yeah, you can pitch in some valuable ideas from the DDD space in those discussions, yeah, bring up a different perspective, yeah, and maybe also get a chance to introduce a little bit of more domain-driven design into your organization. Yeah? But if you're super successful with this communication, the penthouse may say, hey, that sounds like a really cool thing that solves everything. Let's start a domain-driven design initiative. Please don't. Yeah? So that's not what I wanted to do, because nothing in my talk was a silver bullet. Nothing. Yeah? So those are just ideas, yeah, that how you can connect some dots, how you can get into a conversation with leadership people, yeah, how you can ride Gregor's elevator with the ideas of domain-driven design. But please always do that with responsibility. Find out what works for you, for your organization, for the culture of the organization. Do these things. Don't do things that don't provide any value at all. Yeah? Common sense thing, but I think in some scenarios I'm fighting a lot against domain-driven design cargo culting, and I think we harm ourselves if we do that. Yeah? So please be problem-specific. Yeah? If it solves your problem, cool. If it doesn't, don't do it, because then you have a second problem. Okay, that's it from my side. Thank you very much. I'll be around at the conference today and for the afternoon tomorrow, and also in the open space. So if you want to hit me up with questions or a chat, I'd be happy to do that. You can follow me on Mastodon, Blue Sky, LinkedIn. Don't follow me on Twitter anymore. And I see you around. Thank you very much.